Stop the scroll. I said stop it. You think America was built on great ideals? Freedom, democracy, please! It was built on a three-way cocktail of greed, desperate losers, and enough bird crap to fertilize a continent. Welcome to the greatest, most expensive dumpster fire reality show in history. I'm the Midnight Meme Historian, and I'm here to autopsy this whole embarrassing mess. You're gonna want to see this. Forget every boring, sanitized lesson you slept through in history class. We're not here to praise the Founding Fathers. We're here to roast them. Today, you're going to learn the real story. How a handful of European rejects, religious fanatics, and failed businessmen pulled off the most audacious grift in human history. We're talking about a land grab so insane, it makes a Black Friday mob look civilized. This is the story of how the desperate desire for gold and dirt consistently beat out common sense. And yes, we will absolutely explain why a remote island covered in centuries of petrified bird poop guano is still legally US soil. Let's get this shame train rolling. Let's set the scene! The year is 1492. The map of the world looks like it was drawn by a drunk guy who gave up halfway through. Over in Europe, they're convinced the planet is mostly a few connected landmasses surrounded by a world-ending waterfall. Geniuses. Enter Christopher Columbus, a man so confidently wrong he could be a modern-day tech bro. He's like, I've got a killer idea, Your Majesties. I'm gonna sail west to find a faster route to Asia's spice markets. He's basically pitching a disruptive, continent-hopping Uber for nutmeg. He gets the funding after a lot of begging and sails right into the Caribbean. He hits the beaches, looks at the Taino people, and his first thought is wow, a new civilization. It's these must be some weird-looking Indians. The arrogance is breathtaking. He names them anyway because branding is everything. He doesn't find the silks or spices he promised. All he's got is some interesting new plants and a few confused locals. So what does he do? He pivots the pitch. He goes back to Spain and is like, okay, the spice thing is a no-go. Minor setback. But the upside? Unlimited growth potential. The monetization strategy is ... gold. And souls. We can convert the natives to Christianity. He sold them on a spiritual growth SaaS model with a side of plunder. It was the world's first overhyped IPO for a company with no actual product. Now, a few years later, Portugal actually finds the real route to Asia by going around Africa. Spain loses its mind. It's like watching Apple find out Samsung just patented a better phone. The solution these two superpowers come up with is the most audacious, galaxy-brained move in history. They decide to just split the entire planet in half, like a couple of kids dividing a candy bar. They sign the Treaty of Tordesillas, draw a line down a map, and declare everything to the west is Spain's, everything to the east is Portugal's. The opinions of the millions of people already living on those continents, irrelevant. It was the ultimate finders-keepers policy, backed by PayPal authority and sheer violent entitlement. So, Portugal goes east to build a legit trade empire. Spain goes west to loot. And when they get to the Americas, where do they focus? The shiny parts. The Aztecs and the Incas. The places with obvious gold and silver. They send an expedition up into what is now the American South in 1539. It is led by a guy named Hernando de Soto. They march around for 4 years looking for another El Dorado. They find nothing but mosquitoes, hostile tribes, and swamps. De Soto literally dies of a fever on the banks of the Mississippi River, and his men, in a move of pure poetic justice, dump his body in the river he discovered to hide the fact that their glorious leader had croaked. They slink back to Mexico empty-handed, and their official report is essentially, yeah, don't bother. The North is a worthless, backwater trash heap. No ROI. They had the entire future Sun Belt in Midwest right there, and they wrote it off as a bad investment. The sheer lack of vision is staggering. Let me ask you something. You're scrolling through Zillow, you see a free continent. Do you just skip it because the listing photos are bad and there's no obvious gold vein in the backyard? Or Are you already envisioning the strip malls and condos? Type I'd ignore it. Or I'd develop it in the comments. Let us see who has the vision of a Spanish conquistador and who has the mind of a real estate mogul. Cut to England. They're watching Spain get fabulously wealthy and they're feeling serious FOMO. So they decide to get in on the colonial game. Their first attempt is Roanoke, off the coast of North Carolina, in 1585. It goes about as well as you'd expect. They send a group of settlers, then immediately forget about them because England gets into a big naval war with Spain. By the time a supply ship gets back to Roanoke, 3 years later, the place is empty. Just gone! The only clue is the word Croatoan carved into a post. Cue the mystery music. Lost colony. Aliens! Ancient curses! Or ... The logical explanation. They were starving! The local Croatoan people were actually friendly. The colonists probably saw their options. A, sit here and slowly die of malnutrition under the rule of a distant king who clearly does uncare. Or B, go live with the neighbors who actually know how to farm and fish and survive. They chose door number B. They assimilated. The greatest mystery in early American history is probably just a story of people making a rational choice to quit a failing startup and join a more stable company. But that's not a fun story, so we invented a conspiracy. Undeterred by their first spectacular failure, the English try again. Jamestown, 1607. This one sort of works. They survive. Barely. The Jamestown settlers were a bunch of entitled gentlemen who refused to farm because they thought it was beneath them. They were there to find gold, not get their hands dirty. They literally starved to death during the starving time while surrounded by a river full of fish and a forest full of game. Their leadership was so catastrophically bad, it would make a middle manager at WeWork blush. It was a masterclass in incompetence. And then, the main event. The Pilgrims. Oh! The Pilgrims! They show up on the Mayflower in 1620. They didn't come for economic opportunity. They came for the right to be religiously intolerant somewhere new. They were the ultimate Aya moving to a free platform to escape the woke mob guys who then immediately become the new moderators and start banning everyone. They outlawed Christmas. They banned games. They enforced mandatory church attendance. They came for religious freedom. For themselves. For everyone else, it was religious enforcement. The hypocrisy is so thick you could carve a Thanksgiving turkey with it. And you know what's wild? People kept coming. The East Coast became a magnet for Europe's undesirables. Debtors, convicts, religious nutjobs, second sons with no inheritance, and just general hustlers looking for a piece of land to call their own. America, from its very inception, was a nation founded by people running from something. It wasn't a shining city on a hill. It was the world's biggest and most ambitious off-grid survivalist compound. And the chaos was just getting started. Think it was all noble ideals and manifest destiny? Oh, you sweet summer child. It was a fire sale of epic proportions, a geopolitical blunder so massive it makes your last Amazon impulse buy look like a sound investment. I'm the Midnight Meme historian, and I'm here to expose the greatest garage sale in history, where empires lost their minds and America cleaned up. Don't you dare look away! Now, picture this. It's the mid-18th century. Europe's superpowers are playing a giant, bloody game of Risk on actual Earth. The board. North America. Britain's got the East Coast. Spain's flexing in Florida and the Southwest. And France. France is doing that thing where they show up to a potluck with a single baguette and claim the entire dining room. They called it New France, this colossal, squiggly line territory of Louisiana. It wasn't a colony of towns and farms. It was a corporate franchise. A few fur traders, some forts, and a whole lot of claiming. Their entire business model was essentially being the continent's most ambitious Airbnb host who never actually cleaned the rooms. They just put a flag on the roof and sent a bill to nobody. And then the neighbors started fighting. The 1754, the French and Indian War. Let's be real. It should be called the Who Gets to Sell Overpriced Furs to Europeans War. France had maybe 60,000 people here, tops. Their secret weapon. They were slightly less obnoxious to some of the Native American tribes than the British were. So, they formed alliances. Britain's colonies had over 1 million people, and they also buddied up with other tribes. It was the ultimate proxy war, sponsored by royal vanity. And Britain won. The same way a Walmart wins against a local store. They just threw more bodies and more money at the problem until the other guy went bankrupt. They drowned the French in redcoats and debt. But here's the kicker. The beautiful, absurd twist. This war was so expensive, it nearly broke the British treasury. So what's the Crown's brilliant idea? It's the corporate restructuring from hell. They look at the American colonies, the very people they just saved from the French, and say, all right, team, great work. Now, about those expenses, we're going to need to implement some new revenue streams. They started slapping taxes on everything. Sugar, paper, tea, ... basically oxygen. This was taxation without representation, the original subscription service you couldn't cancel. You were getting charged for a product you didn't order, to pay for a service you never asked for, by a board of directors an ocean away who wouldn't return your emails. Sound familiar? Does it feel like when your streaming service jacks up the price for 12 new shows nobody wanted? Or when your phone bill gets littered with new regulatory cost recovery fees? That feeling right there. That simmering, impotent rage. That's exactly how a Boston merchant felt getting taxed on his damn breakfast tea. It's not about the tea. It's about the principle. And that's about some suit in a distant corporate HQ thinking they can just dip into your wallet because they can. So what did the colonists do? They threw the most iconic corporate protest in history, the Boston Tea Party. They dress up like someone's idea of a Native American, the cringeworthy cultural appropriation of it, all and yeeted an entire Fortune 500 company-esque product into the harbor. It was the ultimate I'd like to speak to the manager moment, but with more feathers and better piracy. This, my friends, was the spark. The revolution wasn't just about freedom. It was the world's first and most successful anti-capitalist grift against a multinational corporation that then immediately became a capitalist nation. The irony is so thick, you could build a fort out of it. They fought a war, they won, and they got their independence. But then they had the hangover. The Articles of Confederation were the equivalent of trying to run a country on a group chat. No one had admin privileges. It was a disaster. They were 13 little startups with no central leadership, arguing about who paid for the server costs. So they did what any sensible group of rich white guys does when they mess up. They had a secret meeting and wrote a new rule book. The Constitution. And in 1789, George Washington became the first CEO of USA Inc. But here, that's the thing nobody tells you in the boring history videos. The United States was tiny. A scrawny little strip on the Atlantic. Everything west of the Mississippi. That was Spain's problem. Everything in the middle. A big, mysterious question mark. So, how did we go from that to this? How did America get its upgrade to the premium continental package? The answer involves a narcissist, a slave revolt, and a man who was so desperate for cash he sold an entire continent because he was scared of a bunch of successful rebels. The real story of the Louisiana Purchase is the greatest impulse buy of all time. And it's so much more ridiculous than you can possibly imagine. But that's a story for the next chapter. For now, I want to know from you. What's the modern equivalent of the Boston Tea Party? What subscription service would you gladly dump in a harbor? Spotify, YouTube Premium. Let me know in the comments name and shame the corporate overlords. This is the Midnight Meme Historian signing off to go audit some tea imports. And now, folks, we arrive at the single greatest impulse buy in human history. The moment a fledgling nation went from a cramped studio apartment to but because the previous owner was having a fire sale to fund his crippling war addiction. This is where the story gets so stupid, so gloriously absurd, that you won't know whether to laugh or cry. France gets a new boss. A short king with a big ego and an even bigger appetite for conquest. Napoleon Bonaparte. He's busy turning Europe into his personal playground, but he looks across the ocean and thinks, you know what would really tie this whole empire together? Getting Louisiana back from Spain. So he strong-arms them into handing it over. It's a power move. Meanwhile, back in America, everyone is having a collective panic attack. The entire economy of the western frontier depends on the Mississippi River. It's their Amazon Prime delivery route. And now the most powerful, warmongering man in Europe controls the port of New Orleans. This is like finding out a hostile corporation just bought the internet backbone your entire business runs on. So President Jefferson sends some guys to France with a simple, humble request. Hey, Napoleon, sir, any chance we could just buy New Orleans? Pretty please? But Napoleon's brain is running 1,000,000 calculations per second. His master plan was to use Louisiana as a breadbasket for his sugar colonies in the Caribbean. But then, a slave revolt in Haiti, led by Toussaint Louverture, absolutely wrecks his army. He's also staring down the barrel of another war with Britain, and he knows he's going to need a mountain of cash. So he has what can only be described as a spectacularly chaotic mental breakdown disguised as strategic genius. He looks at his American guests and drops the mother of all plot twists. New Orleans, he scoffs. How? ... small-minded. What if I told you could have all of it? Let me get this straight. This man was offered a city and decided to sell an entire continent instead. He was the original crypto bro dumping his entire portfolio because he saw a shinier, more explosive opportunity. He basically sold his house to buy lottery tickets. $15 million. That was the price. 4 cents an acre. America just doubled its size overnight because Napoleon needed a quick cash infusion for his next violent hobby. The American diplomats were so shocked they almost fainted. They signed the deal before he could sober up and change his mind. It was the geopolitical equivalent of buying a priceless painting at a garage sale because the owner thought it was ugly. The sheer, unadulterated luck of it all is enough to make you believe in karma, or maybe just in the profound stupidity of men in power. And it was the best timed acquisition in history. The American population was exploding. The average family had like 7 kids. They weren't just having children. They were building infantry divisions. All these people needed land, and now they had a blank check to the West, courtesy of a distracted French emperor. This was the ultimate content glut for a nation of settlers. But wait, it gets better. You've got all this new land, and Americans are streaming west. They hit the Great Plains and look around. Wow. Look at all this free real estate. Their philosophy, which they later called Manifest Destiny, was basically divine-sanctioned squatters' rights. It was the 18th century version of, I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you, but with muskets and a profound sense of entitlement. If they found it, they claimed it. If someone else was there, well, that was just a temporary inconvenience. Then we get to Mexico. Oh, Mexico! In 1821, they finally win their independence from Spain. They inherit these vast, sparsely populated northern territories, modern-day Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California. And their government makes a decision so catastrophically dumb it belongs in a textbook under what not to do. They invite Americans to come settle in Texas. It's like inviting a pack of wolves to babysit your sheep. The Americans show up, agree to become Mexican citizens, and convert to Catholicism. They immediately break both promises. They outnumber the Mexicans, bring their slaves, despite it being illegal. And then have the audacity to get mad when Mexico tells them to knock it off. So they revolt. They win at the Alamo AFTA, getting their backsides handed to them. But they turned it into a great PR story on form, the Independent Republic of Texas. They immediately come crawling to the U.S. like a teenager who moved out and now wants to move back in because they ran out of money. The U.S. says no at first. Too messy. Too many slave states! But then, President James K. Polk, a man with the expansionist zeal of a monopolist board game champion, decides he wants it all. He annexes Texas. He provokes a border dispute with Mexico. He wants the war. And he gets it. The Mexican-American War was a master class in bullying. The U.S. Army marches all the way to Mexico City, and when it's all over, the victor's terms are absolutely savage. In the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, the U.S. pays Mexico $15 million for what is now the entire American Southwest. Let's be clear. This wasn't a purchase. This was a mugging where the mugger slips a 20 into your pocket after taking your wallet to feel better about himself. It was a fire sale of epic proportions, and Mexico was the burned-out homeowner. They lost half their territory. The United States completed its continental conquest. And it did it through a combination of dumb luck, naked aggression, and the fact that everyone else was either too broke, too distracted, or too weak to stop them. So tell me, in the comments, right now, who is the modern-day Napoleon, the leader so obsessed with their next big power move that they sell off an empire for quick cash? And who is the James K. Polk, the one who sees a weak neighbor and decides to just take what they want? Legalities be damned. This is the Midnight Meme Historian, and I need to know which one of today's clowns is following the old playbook. Manifest Destiny. Sounds so majestic, doesn't it? Like some grand, divine plan. In reality, it was just a fancy PR term for the oldest hobby in the book. Taking stuff that is you and yours because you think you deserve it more. It was the 19th century version of a tech bro saying disruption when he really means, I am about to violate several antitrust laws. It's the belief that your success is preordained by the universe, and everyone else is just a NPC in your personal video game. So who's our modern-day manifester? Is it the crypto kings buying up virtual real estate in the metaverse? Convinced they're building a new digital frontier? Or is it the billionaire space barons, looking at the stars and seeing not wonder, but a new market to corner and exploit? Who today is walking around with that unshakable belief that their ambition is the same thing as destiny? Type your answer in the comments. Let's see who wins the title of Biggest Manifesting Menace. But the land grab didn't stop at the Pacific. Oh no! Once you're on a roll, you can't just stop. The frontier mentality goes oceanic, which brings us to the single most American law ever passed. The Guano Islands Act of 1856. And yes, it is still technically on the books. Let that sink in. The United States government officially authorized its citizens to go out, find any unoccupied island covered in bird crap, claim it for the USA, and the full military might of the nation would back them up. Why? Because bird poop guano was the miracle fertilizer of the 19th century. It was white gold. This was the ultimate finders keepers doctrine, federally mandated. We went from divine right to ... bird right. It was the most bizarre, grossest form of imperialism imaginable. While European powers were building empires with armies and navies, America was building an empire with a shovel and a strong stomach. We weren't just a nation of settlers. We were a nation of litter box cleaners for the world. I need you to be completely honest with me. Is this the most absurd piece of legislation you've ever heard of? Or does your local town have a law against wearing mismatched socks on a Tuesday that can compete? This is the Midnight Meme Historian, and I demand to know the dumbest, most forgotten law from your corner of the world. Spill the legal tea in the comments. Let's have a laugh at the sheer idiocy of bureaucracy throughout history. And just when you thought it couldn't get more chaotic, gold was discovered in California, right after we took it from Mexico. The timing is so suspiciously perfect. It feels like a poorly written movie plot. The gold rush of 18... Suddenly, every desperate dreamer, bankrupt farmer, and get-rich-quick schemer on the planet descended on California. It was the original FOMO event. Towns sprang up overnight. Lawlessness became the law. It was a real-life battle royale for shiny rocks. This wasn't expansion. It was a feeding frenzy. The American economy got hooked on the pure, uncut adrenaline of sudden, unearned wealth. It set a precedent we've never really shaken. The belief that the next big score is always just over the next hill. But all this expansion had a rotting core. A fatal flaw everyone tried to ignore but was growing uglier by the day. slavery. The entire national economy, the territorial arguments, the political power, struggles it all, circled back to the nation's original sin. The South built an entire aristocratic fantasy on the backs of enslaved people, and they were willing to burn the whole country down to protect it. The North, while far from saintly, increasingly saw the practice as a moral horror and an economic dead end. The tension built for decades until the election of Abraham Lincoln, a man who represented not immediate abolition, but the simple, terrifying idea that slavery should not expand further. That was enough. The Celtics' response was the political equivalent of a toddler flipping the Monopoly board because they losing. They seceded. They started a war. The Civil War was the bloody, brutal invoice for a century of expansion built on hypocrisy and forced labor. All the stolen land, all the manifest destiny, all the grand ambitions, it all came due in a single, devastating conflict. And in the middle of this national bloodletting, what does the U.S. government do? It keeps shopping. Russia, fearing they might lose Alaska to the British in a conflict and get nothing, desperately wants to sell it. So they approach the U.S. Secretary of State, William Seward, while the country is literally tearing itself apart. The negotiations have this surreal, darkly comic energy. It's like haggling over a new car while your house is on fire. Seward, a man obsessed with expansion, sees the deal of a lifetime. $7.2 million. 2 cents an acre for a frozen wasteland everyone called Seward S. Folly and Andrew Johnson S. Polar Bear Garden. They bought it because, well, it was there and it was cheap. It was the ultimate might need a later purchase. The check was literally signed while the nation was recovering from a presidential assassination. The absurdity is just chef's kiss. So let's ask the uncomfortable question. We pat ourselves on the back for ending the Civil War and abolishing slavery, but did we really abolish the mindset that fueled it? Or did we just find new ways to hide the chains? Is the modern gig economy, with its precarious wages and lack of benefits, just a more digitally efficient form of exploitation? Are our pristine products built on supply chains that rely on overseas labor with few choices? Where is the biggest, most hypocritical open secret of modern exploitation? Don't name names, but point fingers at the system. I want to know what you think the new plantation looks like. The Midnight Meme historian is listening. And just like that, the United States went from a continental power to a global one. And the trigger was a suspicious explosion. Talk about a plot twist. Let's set the stage. It's the late 1800s. America is fat and happy, stretching from sea to shining sea. But a bunch of American sugar barons in Hawaii got a little too big for their britches. They overthrew the Hawaiian monarchy in a classic corporate coup. They immediately asked the U.S. to annex the islands. President Grover Cleveland, to his credit, said, "Absolutely not. This is a blatant, illegal land grab." It was a rare moment of conscience. But conscience doesn't last long. In geopolitics, the new fear wasn't missing out on sugar. It was that Germany or Japan would snatch up Hawaii and use it as a forward operating base. So the tune changed from "this is wrong" to, well, if we don't take it, someone else will. It's the same logic a shoplifter uses. If I don't steal this, someone else will. It's not a reason. It's an excuse for greed. So America minded its own interests, not its own business, and took Hawaii. Then, eyes turned to Cuba. Cuba was fighting for its independence from Spain, the last crumbling relic of a dead empire. American newspapers, especially the yellow journalism of Hearst and Pulitzer, were having a field day. They sensationalized every Spanish atrocity. It was the 18th century version of doom scrolling. William Randolph Hearst basically famously said, "You furnish the pictures, I'll furnish the war." The USS Maine, an American battleship, mysteriously blew up in Havana Harbor. The press immediately blamed Spain with zero evidence. "Remember the Maine! To hell with Spain!" became the rallying cry. It was the ultimate false flag operation. whether by accident or design, and it gave the warhawks exactly what they wanted. The Spanish-American! War was less a war and more a global shoving match where the scrawny new kid surprisingly knocks the old bully out cold. The U.S. Navy, fresh and modern, annihilated Spain's ancient fleet. In a matter of months, the U.S. grabbed Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. We didn't just defeat Spain. We liquidated the remainder of its empire for pennies on the dollar. We went from liberators to landlords in the blink of an eye. We told Cuba they were free, but we kept the right to intervene in their affairs whenever we wanted. It was independence with a leash. Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. Straight up colonies. We became the very thing we supposedly revolted against. The irony is so thick you could build a battleship out of it. Let's be real. This was America's debutante ball on the world stage, and we showed up, punched the chaperone, and stole the punch bowl. We played the role of the heroic liberator while quietly pocketing the keys to the kingdom. So who's the modern equivalent? Who est the nation, or the corporation today that rolls into a situation talking about freedom and democracy? But everyone knows they're really there for the resources and the strategic advantage. Who's the 21st century version of the benevolent empire? Sound off in the comments. I need names. Let's call out the hypocritical geopolitics of today. Enter Theodore Roosevelt. The man was a force of nature, a hurricane in a pair of spectacles. When President McKinley was assassinated, this hyperactive and purist-minded cowboy landed in the Oval Office, and his philosophy was simple. Speak softly and carry a big stick. Though, from history, it seems he mostly just shouted and swung the entire forest. He built the Great White Fleet, the second largest navy in the world, and paraded it around the globe just to flex. It was the ultimate military dick pic! His biggest project, the Panama Canal. This is a masterclass in gunboat diplomacy. Colombia owned the land. The U.S. wanted to build a canal. Colombia wanted a fair price. So what did Roosevelt do? He didn't negotiate. He waited for a Panamanian rebellion to conveniently start, then sent the U.S. Navy to block Colombian troops from putting it down. He basically sponsored a new country into existence because the old one was being difficult. Panama was born, and its first act as a sovereign nation was to sign a sweetheart deal giving the U.S. control of the Canal Zone. It was the most blatant, bad faith real estate deal in history. It was like convincing your neighbor's kid to sell you his parents' house while you have them locked in the basement. And when it was finished in 1914, it was a miracle of engineering. It cut weeks off of naval travel time, connecting the two oceans and turning the U.S. Navy into a truly global force. It was the final piece of the puzzle. America was no longer just a powerful country. It was an empire. We had the territory, the navy, and the sheer audacity to project power anywhere on the planet. We had arrived, and just in time, because the entire world was about to trip and fall face first into the meat grinder of the First World War. The age of innocence was over. The age of American power was just beginning. But that, as they say, is a story for another time. A story of trenches, trauma, and America cashing in on the old world's suicide. But for now, I want to know from you. What's the modern-day Panama Canal? What's the massive, world-altering infrastructure project that someone is trying to strong-arm their way into building today? The Midnight Meme historian is listening? So you've just watched a bunch of lunatics, fanatics, and rejects accidentally stumble their way into a superpower. If you enjoyed this spectacular display of historical incompetence, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button with the same energy a colonist smashed a crate of taxed tea. Leave a comment telling me which historical figure makes your blood boil the most. And smash that like button if you finally convinced that all of history is just one big, absurd clown show with a completely unpredictable punchline. Welcome to the Midnight Meme Historian. The circus is always open. The First World War ended. America which showed up late to the party and then took all the credit, emerged, scratched up, but stupidly wealthy, and then came the roaring 20s. My God, what a time to be alive and morally bankrupt. It was the original influencer era. Jazz, flappers, speakeasies, and a stock market soaring higher than a bootlegger's plane. Everyone was a day trader. Your barber, your baker, your mailman day. We're all giving you stock tips. It was a national delusion of grandeur. A collective belief that the line on the chart would just go up forever. It was the greatest party in history, and everyone was invited. The hangover, however, was biblical. Then came 1929, the crash. It didn't just dip. It didn't correct. It jumped off the top of the Empire State Building and took the entire economy with it. Millionaires became paupers overnight. They weren't buying yachts. They were selling apples on street corners. The Great Depression. The very land itself seemed to revolt against the Heartlander. Dust Bowl turned farms into apocalyptic waste, sending desperate families fleeing west like refugees in their own country. Everything the American dream was built on hard work. Land ownership, optimism evaporated into literal dust. And out of this despair, a voice. Franklin Delano Roosevelt? A man confined to a wheelchair who had to convince a nation that couldn't T-walk that it could run again. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. The New Deal wasn't just a policy. It was a life raft thrown to a drowning country. It was a massive, unprecedented expansion of the federal government. Was it socialism? His critics screamed that it was it salvation? For millions. It was the only thing putting food on the table. It was a desperate, messy, and controversial attempt to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. But let's be real, what truly saved? The American economy wasn't the New Deal, it was the same thing that always saves it. A big, fat, horrifying war. So, let's ask the uncomfortable question. The Great Depression? The mother of all market corrections? Did we learn a single solitary lesson? Or did we just do the exact same thing in 2008 with fancier terms like collateralized debt obligations and subprime mortgages? Are we just doomed to repeat this cycle of manic greed and catastrophic collapse every few generations? Type, we learned nothing, or we redoomed to repeat it in the comments. Give me your most hopelessly realistic economic forecasts. While the world started setting itself on fire again. America tried to stay on the porch. Isolationism was the popular mood. Let Europe deal with its own mess. That cozy fantasy ended on December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor. The Japanese attack wasn't just a shock. It was a national gut punch that launched 1,000 ships. America was all in. We became the arsenal of democracy. Factories that used to churn out cars started pumping out tanks and bombers. Women stepped into the factories, birthing the icon of Rosie the Riveter. The war didn't just end the Depression. It supercharged the American industrial machine into something the world had never seen. It forged the United States into a global superpower. But that power came with a terrifying new invention and an even more terrifying moral burden. The Manhattan Project. The most secretive, expensive, and destructive engineering project in human history. And it worked. In 1945, the sun itself was brought down to Earth over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The war ended in the most definitive, horrifying way possible. A new era was born, not with a whisper, but with a fireball that shadowed the rest of human existence. The Atomic Age. America now stood atop the world, victorious, wealthy, and holding the keys to the apocalypse. We had won everything, and in doing so, we had given ourselves something new to fear forever. And now, the ultimate Monday morning quarterbacking question. The atomic bomb. Was it the necessary evil that saved 1 million lives by ending the war without a bloody invasion of Japan? Or was it the original sin? The moment we opened Pandora's box and guaranteed our own potential extinction. Put yourself in Truman's shoes for a second. The weight of the world on your shoulders. The advice of your generals, the fatigue of a nation, the unknown horror of the new weapon. What would you have done? Would you have given the order? Type yes, no, or I refuse to judge in the comments. Let's see how good we are at moral calculus from the comfort of our 75 years of hindsight. This is the Midnight Meme Historian, and I want to see your verdict. The good war was over. Now came the weird one. The Cold War. A 4-decade-long global staring contest where both players had a gun pointed at each other's head and the entire planet's. It was a paradox. An era of unprecedented American prosperity and paranoia, all wrapped in one. We built suburbs and bomb shelters. We bought shiny new cars and practiced duck and cover drills in school. We were terrified of the shadow we ourselves were casting. And inside the country, that fear curdled into something ugly. McCarthyism, a national panic attack disguised as patriotism. A senator from Wisconsin waving a piece of paper, claiming he had a list of communists in the State Department. It was a witch hunt. Careers were ruined on whispers and guilt by association. The national pastime wasn't baseball. It was looking under the bed for Reds. All while, outside, the real competition was heating up. The space race. The Soviets launch Sputnik, and America collectively loses its mind. They put a man in space first. We were losing. So, what did we do? We did the most American thing possible. We wrote the biggest check imaginable. We decided to go to the moon. Not for science, not for exploration, but to win. The Apollo program was the ultimate flex. The most expensive. Nah, we're better in human history. And it worked. That one small step was a giant leap for propaganda. But down on Earth, the wars were anything but clean. Korea. Then, Vietnam. A slow, grinding, televised nightmare that tore the country apart. Vietnam was the moment the American mirror cracked. The unshakable confidence of the World War II generation ran into the cynical, questioning eyes of their children. We were the most powerful military force in history, and we were being bled dry by a guerrilla army in black pajamas. We dropped more bombs than in all of World War II, and we still lost. The irony was as thick and toxic as Agent Orange. So, let's ask the big question. The Cold War. A clash of two ideologies that were more afraid of each other than they understood each other. Who really won? Capitalism? Or did fear win? Are we just replaying the same tired song today, just with a different album cover? Is the new Cold War with China? Or is it something else? Maybe the enemy is internal now. Maybe the new Red Scare is a blue scare or a red hat scare. Tell me in the comments who is America's new Cold War rival. Or are we our own worst enemy? Then it happened. The Soviet Union just dissolved. It didn't go out with a bang, but with a bureaucratic whimper. And just like that, America was alone on top. The last superpower standing. A guy named Francis Fukuyama famously declared at the end of history, like, that was it. We'd reached the final form of human government. Liberal democracy and free market capitalism. Everyone could just go home now. The sheer, unadulterated arrogance of it all. Welcome to the 90s. The decade of delusion. If the Cold War was a tense thriller, the 90s was a sitcom. It was the era of frosted tips, dial-up internet, and the unshakable belief that the big problems were solved. Bill Clinton was in the White House. The economy was booming. And the internet transformed from a military tool into a giant, unregulated mall. Everyone was a dot-com genius. Your dog could get venture capital for a website that sold pet rocks. It was a party, and we were all invited. And then, as it always does, the bill came. The dot-com bubble burst with a spectacular pop. But that was just a warning shot. The real wake-up call came on a clear Tuesday morning in September 9/11, 2001. The towers fell. The Pentagon burned. And that cozy, 90s illusion of safety that America was untouchable on its continent-sized fortress shattered into a million pieces. The vulnerability was terrifying. The response was swift and brutal. The war on terror, Afghanistan, Iraq, we were right back at it. But this enemy was different. It wasn't a nation. It was an idea. A ghost. You can't defeat a ghost in a tank. So the wars dragged on, and the fear came home to stay. So be honest with me. The 90s. That last decade of innocence. Do you look back on it with nostalgia? Or was it all just a naive fantasy, a collective delusion before the world came crashing back in? More importantly, can we ever afford to be that carefree again? Or has the world officially lost its mind? Type your answer in the comments. What was the peak decade for humanity? The 90s? The 80s? The 1770s? Or have we already passed the point of no return? The Midnight Meme historian wants to know if the best is behind us, so here we are. America in the 21st century. An empire on the edge. A nation perpetually torn between its idealistic founding mythology and a chaotic, terrifyingly uncertain future. From a few desperate colonies founded by religious outcasts to a global hyperpower staggering under the weight of responsibilities it never asked for and does unknow how to handle. Its story is a cocktail of unbelievable luck, reckless courage, horrifying brutality, and an unstoppable, almost pathological drive to keep moving forward. It's a story that has everything. Heroes and villains, genius and madness, soaring hope and crushing disappointment. And this story isn't over. It's being written right now. Every tweet, every piece of legislation, every protest in the street sits another line in this endless, absurd, utterly captivating novel. And judging by the absolute fireworks in my comment section, you all are just as invested as I am. I see you back there at Thunderbird 466, still fiercely defending the honor of slave-owning philosophers. I see you at SONA 1976, keeping your critiques beautifully brief and salty. And at Reaction Please, still questioning my very humanity because the truth is just that uncomfortable. You are all part of the story now. This chaotic, unfiltered debate is the direct descendant of those same town square arguments that sparked a revolution. It's messy. It's infuriating. It's kind of beautiful. So, you've just mainlined the entire unhinged history of the American experiment. If your brain isn't completely melted from this concentrated dose of absurdity, sarcasm, and historical bird crap, then congratulations, you are a true patriot of chaos. Now it's your turn. This isn't a history lecture. It's a collective therapy session! Smash that subscribe button like a Boston colonist smashing a crate of tax tea. Let the algorithm know you crave more forbidden knowledge. Leave a comment telling me which historical figure we should psychologically autopsy next. Napoleon and his short king complex, Catherine the Great, and the horse rumors. The vote is now open. Hit the like button if you believe deep down that all of history is just a beautifully documented dumpster fire, and we all just adding our own garbage to the pile. This is the Midnight Meme Historian, signing off. Remember, the past isn't just prologue. It's the greatest meme ever created, waiting for someone with the guts to point and laugh.